and we will follow.
Hello and welcome to the premiere episode of Trinity Talk Live, water cooler conversation but from a Christian perspective. I'm Ken Coughlan, and in a minute I'm going to explain to you exactly how the show is going to work, but first what I'd like to do is introduce our panel for today. So let's start by seated to my left, your right, is Ben Lander. Ben is the lay minister here at Trinity. He's been here for about 5 years, the same amount of time as Ryan, who I'll introduce in a second. He started out here as the high school youth director and has now elevated himself to the lay minister, and he's working towards ordination. He's actually working on his master's of divinity right now. He has been married for 6 years to his wife Katie, and he has 2 children. He likes reading, especially comics, Star Wars, and superheroes. He used to do martial arts, so hopefully he won't get angry with me as we're going through the show today, and rock climbing and anything involving being outside. Thank you very much for coming, Ben.
Thanks for having me.
And seated to my right is Ryan McAllister. Ryan is the director of contemporary and youth music here at Trinity. He also is married with 2 kids.
That's right.
I have like the same people on both sides of me almost,
That's right.
just about. Ryan has worked previously in both the Presbyterian and the Church of the Brethren denominations, and he likes sports, especially basketball and snow skiing. Welcome, Ryan. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ken.
So let me take a moment here to explain a little bit how the show is going to work. All right. Trinity Talk Live is a talk show. It's a video podcast where we're going to have a panel of 3 people each week. I'll be here as the regular host each week, and we're going to have a rotating guests, two rotating guests that are going to be different each and every week. We're going to start out each show with a brief rundown of some current events. Now, we got kind of 2 criteria for the current events we're going to be talking about. The first criteria is specifically it's got to be something that's concerning to Christians or Christianity. And we're also looking for things that maybe aren't getting the media coverage, so maybe you haven't heard about it before you're watching our show here. So we're going to run down a few stories that have happened over the course of the past week approximately. The panel will have a chance to comment on anything in particular that stands out to them in those news stories. And then we're going to move on to our topic of the week. Each week we're going to focus on a main topic for about 20 minutes of the show that is something that is of concern to Christians in their everyday lives. That's pretty much how the show is going to work. I think that's a good summary. Otherwise, people figure it out as we go along, right? So it's first episode. Good. It's always a little bit bumpy. Right. So what we're going to do, we're going to launch right into our current events segment, okay? So for the current events segment today, I got 3 stories that I picked out over the past week. I'll run them down, and then you guys can interject at the end, anything that stands out to you. The first story, the main underlying story here actually was kind of reported, and I'm sure a lot of people heard on May 27th, there was a bus attack on some Coptic Christians in Egypt. There were 28 people killed and 23 were injured. What hasn't gotten as much of the news coverage is the response to that. Bishop Angelos of the Coptic Orthodox Church in the United Kingdom actually wrote a statement to the ISIS terrorists who committed the attack. And what he said in that statement, he said, "You are loved by me and millions like me because I and we believe in transformation." Story number 2, the United States military is looking for more detailed designations of the religious preferences of its 1.3 million service members. What they've done is they've removed a lot of the categories that the service members would check off when describing what their religious affiliation is. Things like Protestant, no denominational preference, Protestant, other churches, even things for people that aren't necessarily active churchgoers, like not applicable and no religious preference have been removed, and they've replaced them with other more specific categories to the point they now have 216 different affiliations that the service members can select from. Now, the Department of Defense says that this is so that they can better serve the faith traditions of the military personnel, because apparently the religious composition of the chaplain corps of late has not really mirrored the composition of the service members at large. So they're hoping by getting this more detailed information, they can better serve the faith needs of their service members. And the last story I wanted to point out is from Michigan. Country Mill Farms has filed a lawsuit against the city of East Lansing because the city has refused to let them participate in the farmers market. Country Mill has been part of the farmers market for the past 7 years, but in 2016, city officials saw a post on Country Mill's Facebook page, and it was an inquiry where someone was asking, does Country Mill Farms allow same-sex weddings to be performed at the farm? And the owners had indicated on Facebook that because of their Catholic faith, they did not allow same-sex marriages on the farm. Well, Country Mills Farms is actually located 22 miles outside the boundaries of the city of East Lansing, so they're not subject to East Lansing's ordinances. East Lansing does have an ordinance that does cover the general business practices. It's our anti-discrimination ordinance, but obviously does not apply to the farm. Well, what happened is once the city saw this Facebook post, they contacted Country Mill Farms, asked them to voluntarily withdraw from the farmers market. And when the farm indicated they would not, they enacted a new rule for participation in the farmers market that said that in order to participate in the farmers market, you have to abide by our human relations ordinance and your general business practices, even if you're not located within the city, so that when the farm applied to participate the following season, the city said, well, because of your Facebook post, you're no longer in compliance with this new rule that we just enacted, even though that rule was pretty clearly enacted specifically targeting that participant. So now that lawsuit has just recently been filed. Who knows what's going to come of that? So let's start with Ryan.
Okay.
What stood out to you there?
Well, I think the first story really stood out, and the response from the bishop. I mean, what a compassionate and loving way to de-escalate the situation, if that's even possible. It just seems like terrorists, one of the goals is just to escalate the fear, escalate, and just to say, to step back, you're loved, don't come back at them. They believe in transformation. I think it made me just pause and think, wow, that's really powerful. And when it seems everything swirling around us is so full of fear, I don't know what other word than that. It keeps happening. It's so sad that you wake up and every day you see a new news story with something similar. It seems like we get desensitized, and this kind of a response is better than nothing, and it's certainly better than one of fear and retaliation for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was thinking when I saw that and hearing what you're saying about it, it makes me think of, the culture we live in here in America. I mean, all you have to do is go on social media one day and see the types of things that we're getting outraged about. It kind of shines a light on us here in the Western world, I think, somewhat, that maybe we're not reacting as Christ would have us react to some of the things that we see in our lives. I don't know.
I think we can get fatigued. Everyone's seen the attack in Manchester, and I was sitting on the couch, and we have two kids, a 2-month-old and a 2-year-old, so we're going to talk a little bit more about being busy and tired. And my wife has been so strong in really taking that, especially with our 2-month-old. But I sat down, I looked, and it popped up on the phone, and I said, there's been another attack in Manchester, and immediately we were both like, I don't know if I can read this right now. I think we feel so fatigued and drained, but this kind of a response, saying a prayer, coming at it from just a loving Christian perspective is so much healthier than getting to a place of despair and you're so distraught. I almost don't want to check my phone and the news. I want to be plugged in, but it's so disheartening.
Yeah. What stood out to you, Ben?
Well, I'd actually have to also say the first one with the response of the Coptic Church, and I think Ryan kind of hit the nail on the head with just the response really should instill with us this renewed sense of how we should then respond. I think the word you used, they de-escalated the situation, and I think that's the goal. The purpose of these terrorist attacks is to instill fear. It is, to get a response. And when the church especially, or when just a loving response comes out of that, I think it really undercuts the core of what they're trying to get at. They're trying to instill that fear, but by coming back and saying, no, we forgive you, we love you. I think back to years ago with the Amish and the response of the man who'd come in and shot all those children, and the Amish community just came immediately together. They banded together and they issued a statement of forgiveness to this man, to his family. And I think that's even more powerful than retaliation, because retaliation is just, an eye for an eye, tooth for tooth. But Jesus says, if someone slaps you on the cheek, turn to them your other cheek also. It's this radical change that Jesus brings in people. That's not a human response. That's the Holy Spirit working through those people and working through the Coptic Church in this situation. And, Jesus even said, the world will know, or they will know that you are my disciples if you have love for one another. And I think if we have love for each other especially, but love for the world, I think it undercuts the whole mindset that they're trying to play to.
Thank you. All right. Well, That's the current events segment. Congratulations. We got through our first current events segment of the Trinity Talk live show. Yay.
Done.
All right. So we are going to move right into our topic of the week. Now, the topic of the week is how busy is too busy? was a 2000 survey of 20,000 Christians from around the world, actually for 139 different countries. And when they looked at the results of that survey, more than 4 in 10 Christians said that they either often or always rush from task to task. That's 40% of us. And around 6 in 10 Christians, around 60% of us, said that it is often or always true that the busyness of life gets in the way of developing my relationship with God. Now, they actually broke it down by profession. And believe it or not, by profession, and this is where I'm going to scare Ben a little bit, by profession, pastors were actually the most likely to say not only that they rush from task to task, 54% of pastors said they rush from task to task, but they also were the most likely to say that this busyness gets in the way of developing their relationship with God. 65% of pastors said that the busyness gets in their way of developing that relationship, and these are the people that are spiritual leaders. That's concerning, obviously. We got to figure out what are we doing to our pastors to make them feel this way. So Ben, since you're the one that's actually working towards this goal, hopefully I haven't scared you away too much,
No.
let me start out with you and ask you a little bit about, first of all, what is it about busyness that causes us and can actually create a barrier between us and God?
Yeah, what I think busyness does to us is that, we all have the same amount of time in a day, right? God gave us all 24 hours in a day, and it's how we choose to use those hours, what we fill them with, that kind of dictates our schedule. And, a lot of times, even Christians, we tend to fill things in our schedule that are not necessarily bad things. There's a lot of good things going on, and a lot of things that I think you might qualify as ministry or whatever. But we tend to say yes to a lot of things, and we, at least me personally, I have a problem saying no. And that's, maybe for a myriad of reasons. You want to be helpful, you want to be, you don't want to miss out on what maybe God might do through something. But I think what we had talked about before, that there's this pride maybe that kind of steps in and gets in the way. And anything that gets in the way of us being completely relying on God detracts from our spiritual growth.
Let me build on something that you mentioned, and I'll throw this over to Ryan. Ben mentioned pride. And again, something that I read when I was, getting ready for this also talked about pride. And what it basically said is that the author of this article that I was reading felt that one of the reasons people tend to overbook themselves is pride. And what they meant by that is sometimes people so much want affirmation from others, they so much want approval from others, that we're going to overbook ourselves with all sorts of things so we can get that praise. Another way pride, it said, can sometimes work into it is if we get almost like this big ego where we're like, well, nobody can do this job as well as I can. And so we kind of think, well, I have to be the one to do it then because nobody else can do it. I can't delegate this because it has to be me, it has to be me, it has to be me. Have you ever seen that? Have you ever experienced that, I guess? It's kind of a human emotion. What do you think?
I think it's real, and it happens. I mean, I think our culture is a culture of if you're not busy, then you're lazy. Like, I think it can really shift that way. Ben and I are both millennials. We both fall in that general, even if we're on the older side of that, probably, Facebook generation or whatever. What you see is people's best faces and all of their accomplishments constantly. And I think you have to be really careful not to get sucked into that lie that if you're not doing a million different things, a million different balls in the air at all times, that you're a failure. You're not working hard. You're not producing. You're not pulling yourself up by your bootstraps and, conquering the world.
You mentioned the culture we're living in and social media, Facebook, and I'm curious, Ben, how you think this plays into it. If you just look at someone's Facebook, a lot of people's Facebook profiles, you're going to think that everything's going beautifully. Not everybody. Don't get me wrong. It almost seems to be one extreme or the other.
Exactly,
There's some people saying about how everything's going negative, and other people talking about all the positive things. But when we put out there on Facebook, just I accomplished this, I accomplished this, I accomplished this, but we don't put out there all the, I guess you could say, the in between time or the stress, the headache that went into it. does it almost create a culture where, keeping up with the Joneses? Well, man, I don't feel like I'm busy enough because look at everything that Susie Q's been getting done over the past week, And if so, what do we do about it?
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right that especially with the access to information and, when people, what Ryan was saying, when people post on social media, they're not either one extreme or the other, but normally they're going to put their best foot forward. They're going to put their best face out there saying, look what I accomplished. This is the kid's schedule for this whole week. This is what I'm doing and all these balls that I'm juggling and I'm keeping it all together and I'm happy. And, and there's a term that we use in the church, maybe not regularly, but it's called Pollyannaism. When people come to church every Sunday and they have this big old smile on their face and you ask, how are you? You go, oh, I'm fine. How are you? That's the automatic response. And a lot of times we don't want to get into the whole oh, well, I'm stressed. I've got this that's due. I've got all these things. I've got this problem going on at home. I've got this problem with my car that I got to get fixed. We don't want to, maybe sometimes part of pride, we don't want to let people in and bog people down with our problems per se. But also we want people to acknowledge that, oh, hey, look how good they're doing. Look how strong they are. Look how together they have it. What we're called to be as Christians is a community where we can be real with each other. We don't have to wear a face. We don't have to wear a mask. God calls us all, while we are still sinners, Christ died for us. He calls us, the dirty, nitty gritty aspects of life that we don't see on social media, the in-between times that people don't let in. But the second part of your question was, what do we do about it? Really, I think maybe limit ourselves. Maybe part of this whole idea of how we schedule our time and how busy is too busy. And a lot of times we busy ourselves with things like social media. We say, oh, I got to take a break. But really, that's no less stressful when you go on social media. You see all of these people's, all these things, these negative things. My wife and I have had these conversations where we've had to maybe not unfriend people on Facebook, but unfollow people because all of these negative comments, and we don't want to surround ourselves with all that negativity. And me, myself, I have a Facebook account. I don't post nearly as much as I should, just because, I try to keep this balance of...
I tag you in things. It takes you a week to notice something.
I know. That's what I have. That's what I have my wife for. 99% of my notifications are what my wife has posted, pictures of the kids and things like that. They're all things that I'm tagged in, not things that I've posted myself. But yeah, I'll get on there once in a while, and to me, it's not a big thing. Maybe I'm like a weird millennial that's not really that plugged into Facebook. But I think it does kind of create this hedge where I'm not always comparing myself to people,
Just to piggyback on that, Ken, something that I was thinking about in preparing for this just really connects with that, and that's multitasking is not a must. And it seems that's another cultural thing that is just accepted now. You're on your phone, you're watching the kids, you're fixing dinner all at the same time. I mean, we don't have to be that way. We can give more attention to one thing. One thing that we've talked about in worship with Pastor Paul and others while we're planning services and other events is, are we taking time to be quiet and listen? Because that's so important, not just in prayer, but in worship, in life. Are you listening to the cues God is giving you? Because they might not be through social media. They just might be through another medium out there in the world. Yeah,
Psalm 46:10, be still and know that I am God. Sometimes we need to take a break and be still. Something you mentioned there a second ago made me think I have a friend of mine who is a professional organizer. Her name is Nettie Owens, and so if she's watching this, I'm giving a shout out to Nettie Owens. But she actually did a video. She has some of her customers or whatever send her little cards. They write down what questions they have they want her to answer, and she has little videos where she pulls them out and then she randomly picks a question and she answers whatever it is on the fly. And recently she had a very similar one where a customer had asked her about organization and over booking yourself and making yourself too busy, and how do you prevent that? And one of the things she mentioned was very similar to something you said. Well, think of it as if the amount of time you have available is a piece of cake. Well, if you fill yourself up with 20 different things, then each one of those 20 things can only get a small crumb of the cake, and you can't give a whole slice to any one particular activity. Whereas if you can limit the number of things you can say, and it's tough, you got to learning to say no, but if you can limit the things that you do say yes to, then you can give a much larger slice of the cake to each individual activity, and you're not shortchanging anybody. So let me ask you a question then, Ben, building on that. All right, so we know we have to limit. We know we have to say no to some things. I guess obviously we need to be seeking the Holy Spirit's guidance more so in our lives to help us make these choices about what we should be saying yes to and what we should be saying no to. But how do you do that exactly? How do you discern what to say yes to and what not to?
Yeah, I think it goes back to, if I had to pick one word, it would be intentionality. Being intentional about that slice of cake that we have and knowing exactly how many pieces are in it and how to divide that up, and maybe taking a look at how do you view your day, how do you view your week, how do you view your month, your year, and when you look at your schedule, is it full of things that you have to get done, things that are urgent? There's this neat little book, I strongly recommend it. It's a really small, really quick read, but it's called The Tyranny of the Urgent. Mm-hmm. And I think we get so stuck in that trap of, there's deadlines I got to meet, and there's things that I got to get done, and I can't say no to those. Mm-hmm. So it becomes this tyranny where our calendars, our schedules are ruled by those things that need to get done. And for me especially, I realize this with being in school, having full-time ministry, having 2 kids. I've got papers that are due by midnight tonight that I haven't finished yet. And, part of that's my own fault. We tend to procrastinate a little bit. But there's a quote that I heard from one minister. He said, his schedule, or he says, he uses the first person. So he says, my schedule is less about what I need to get done and more about who I want to become. So I think the intentionality is maybe looking at, what are those things that we need to get done, and planning accordingly, what deadlines we have coming up, and properly planning for those accordingly. But more so, make a to-be list, things that you want to be. You want to be a good father, a good husband, a good minister, and that's not just people who are in full-time ministry, that's anybody. We believe in the ministry of all believers. Everybody who believes in Christ is called to ministry to some degree. It's just sharing your faith. And so being intentional about what do you do with the first 15 minutes of your day. I've come to find out that, not that I do this every single day, I should, and this goes back to the whole 65% of pastors say, the busyness of life gets in the way. Yeah. But I find that when you can allocate those first 15 minutes of your day and be in a devotion, be in prayer. I've got several different apps on my phone, and I find it really useful, and the technology is really useful nowadays that we can plug into that sort of things. But like the Bible app, there's like this little widget that comes up with a verse of the day, and I read that. I use my phone as my alarm clock. I use my phone for pretty much everything. But as soon as I turn my alarm clock off, I swipe over, I look at the verse of the day. That's kind of God's wake-up call. Mm-hmm. And that kind of sets the tone for the rest of your day.
If you hit the snooze button, do you get a new verse?
No, actually, that would be that'd be a neat app. There is another one that I have. It's called God's Promises for You, and you can tap and refresh, and it gives you a new promise.
See, I think the snooze button might be a bad idea though, because that just gives you an excuse to keep going back to sleep. But no, I just need more God today. So
unless the next verse that came up was a little more convicting about
right
getting out. It's not a bad idea. We should have to look at it.
No, actually remember having this conversation with my wife saying, one of the things that I'm most looking forward to in heaven is that there's no more deadlines. At least no more stress about deadlines.
When you're dealing with eternity, you don't have as much time pressure.
Exactly.
So, yeah. Is there anything else we haven't covered that you wanted to share with us today about this?
I agree with Ben. Intentionality. I think we talk about priority. Maybe that's not a word that we've said a lot on there, but that's maybe obvious. And I was just thinking, maybe this is the musician in me, but we have to find a rhythm in our life, a rhythm. And I think that there's a big difference between rhythm and just simply a routine, because rhythm has some flexibility. Rhythm incorporates things that are important, but routine can lead into a rut, and that's what we don't want. We need some freshness. We need a chance to deviate a little bit if our priorities change. But one rhythm that we've gotten into recently, we're juggling 2 kids. Again, one of them is 2 months old. It's hard to find time where it's just my wife and I, and it's usually when they go down at the end of the day, and in that time we either do everything that has not been done, or we do nothing because we're exhausted.
Right.
But we're trying to be intentional with, let's spend that time together. And we've been doing a Bible study together, a little devotional, and God's really met us there, and it's been a wonderful time. Even though we're tired, we feel rejuvenated. We feel more filled up despite being so tired, despite being so busy, and that's just something that's in our rhythm now.
Wait till you have a teenager. That's all I'm saying. So.
We're trying to savor the time now, right? Don't get ahead of ourselves. Yes. We'll say a prayer for you, Ken.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. I'm going to need it. So, anything else that you wanted to share, Ben, that we haven't talked about already?
Yeah, I think, those would be the three main points. I think just intentionality, priority, and finding a rhythm. God created the Sabbath for a reason, and Jesus said that the Sabbath was created for man, not man for the Sabbath. So it's not like a rigid, structured, routine, like Ryan was saying, but this rhythm of work and rest, and finding that balance. And maybe that's another word that we could use: the balance of scheduling your day according to what God has in store for you. And I think another thing to maybe just throw in there real quick is to view, and Pastor Paul always says this, and something I've picked up on, he says, view interruptions as opportunities. I think the Holy Spirit works a lot of times through interruptions, things that, full disclosure, I wasn't expecting to be here today. But no, I think, maybe God can work through this, maybe something that we've talked about can touch somebody else's life, and you'll meet them where they are.
That's great. I think people watching this are going to think that we planned this out ahead of time, especially the way you lay it out. It's like there's these 3 bullet points. They're going to think that we planned this ahead of time, and we really didn't. No. Ben's not kidding. Ben, prior to this morning, didn't know he was doing this show today. And so it's just the way the conversation went. So I really appreciate you guys. It was very valuable. Hopefully people out there have gotten some kind of useful advice on how to handle this. So thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for both of the guests here today.
Thanks, Ken.
Ben Lander, Ryan McAllister. I appreciate you both being here. We are going to be back again next week, and every week the shows go up on our YouTube channel. That's the Trinity Joppa YouTube channel on Tuesdays at 12 noon. So if you haven't subscribed already, if you could please go ahead and subscribe to that channel. Also, if you do like this video, if you could do us a favor and click the like button, that's a thumbs up button on the YouTube page. What that actually does is it allows more people to see these videos, because YouTube kind of uses that as an algorithm to decide which videos they're going to suggest to other people who have maybe watched a similar type of video. Hey, maybe you want to watch this one next. So if you do like what you see in this video or any of the videos, please go ahead and click the thumbs up button, because that helps us get this word out to more people. Also, if you do go ahead and subscribe to our YouTube channel, we'd appreciate it. There's a lot more on the Trinity Joppa channel other than just Trinity Talk Live. So please take a moment to go ahead and explore and see everything else that we've got on there. And be sure to join us next week. Next week, we're going to be back, me, not them. We got some new guests coming in. Next week, the topic we're going to be talking about is world missions and what we are doing about it as a Christian church, especially here in America, and what we could be and should be doing about it, maybe doing a little bit more. So we hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much for joining us. See you next week, and God bless.
In your word we will follow.